Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us on short notice. We just want to get some information out to you guys. So what we're going to do is we have Lieutenant General Joseph Gusella, who is the commander of U.S. Air Force's Central Command. He's calling us from the Combined Air Operations Center Al Udeid, Qatar. He's going to make a brief statement on last night's shoot down. And at this time, he's not going to take any questions, but we'll hopefully be coming back to you guys with some more information later today. So, General.
Jonathan, can we ask you why no questions?
Hello. Hello, good afternoon. This is Lieutenant General Joseph Guastella, Commander of the U.S. Air Force's Central Command. I'm prepared to give a statement, but I won't be answering questions at this time. A U.S. Navy RQ-4 was flying over the Gulf of Oman and the Strait of Hormuz on a recent surveillance mission in international airspace in the vicinity of recent IRGC maritime attacks when it was shot down by an IRGC surface-to-air missile fired from a location in the vicinity of Goruk, Iran. This was an unprovoked attack on a U.S. surveillance asset that had not violated Iranian airspace at any time during its mission. This attack is an attempt to disrupt our ability to monitor the area following recent threats to international shipping and the free flow of commerce. Iranian reports that this aircraft was shot down over Iran are categorically false. The aircraft was over the Strait of Hormuz and fell into international waters. At the time of the intercept, the RQ-4 was operating at high altitude, approximately 34 kilometers from the nearest point of land on the Iranian coast. This dangerous and escalatory attack was irresponsible and occurred in the vicinity of established air corridors between Dubai, UAE, and Muscat, Oman, possibly endangering innocent civilians. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have this available for download.
Why didn't you take any questions? Why were there no questions?
Sure. Yeah, we'll go ahead and continue to address your questions. Please work with Rebecca and U.S. Central Command.
Showdown between the U.S. and Iran tonight reaching a new flashpoint after the Iranians shot down an American surveillance drone. Here are the pictures tonight from the Pentagon. New U.S. surveillance that they say shows that drone that was struck falling from the sky. They say the Iranians used a surface-to-air missile to do this. To give you an idea of what this drone looks like, this is the type of surveillance drone as wide as the wingspan of a 737. Iran says the U.S. was in Iranian airspace. The U.S. says they were not. President Trump suggesting today maybe the shootdown was a mistake, that it could have been someone, quote, loose and stupid. But tonight, news coming out of an emergency meeting in the Situation Room, and Martha Raddatz leads us off with new images tonight now from the Iranians, seeming to declare this was no mistake.
Iran claims this is its surface-to-air missile streaking towards the U.S. drone last night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, exploding on impact, a huge fireball filling the screen. The video is not verified. The U.S. military also releasing its own video of the stricken aircraft plummeting into the water. Shortly after, Iranian TV announces the shootdown, claiming it was in Iranian airspace. Its Revolutionary Guard Corps stating an enemy that violates our borders will not return and will be destroyed. The Global Hawk, one of America's most sophisticated unmanned surveillance aircraft, its wingspan as broad as a 737, took off from an airbase in the UAE hours earlier, monitoring the Gulf of Oman, where recent attacks were carried out on oil tankers, and over the Strait of Hormuz, that vital oil shipping waterway, in international airspace, says the U.S. When the drone was hit, the U.S. Navy surging its partner through rough seas to the debris field to recover what they could of the classified aircraft. At 10:15 a.m., after President Trump is briefed, he tweets this stern warning: Iran made a very big mistake. Just over an hour later, Iran's foreign minister firing back on Twitter: we don't seek war, but will zealously defend our skies, land, and waters. At 12:15, the U.S. military weighs in. pinpointing where the drone was hit, some 21 miles from the Iranian coast, well away from the 12-mile territorial limit, in sharp contrast to the Iranian claim the drone went down over its territorial waters.
This was an unprovoked attack on a U.S. surveillance asset that had not violated Iranian airspace at any time during its mission. Iranian reports that this aircraft was shot down over Iran are categorically false.
At 12:40 today, from the Oval Office, President Trump with further warnings.
They made a very bad mistake.
But then a strange twist, the president seeming to question whether Iran intended to shoot down the drone and even the significance of the attack.
I would imagine it was a general or somebody that made a mistake in shooting that drone down. I find it hard to believe it was intentional, if you want to know the truth. I think that it could have been somebody who was loose and stupid that did it.
And Martha Raddatz, who was on the air with me today, with us live tonight. And as this was unfolding, Martha, tonight, even the president suggesting it could have been a mistake. But the Iranians, as you reported there, are not backing off their claims of responsibility tonight.
They aren't, David. And as you know, miscalculation has always been a fear during this incredibly tense time with Iran. But today, Iranian officials themselves made it very clear this wasn't some rogue Iranian officer accidentally firing a missile. Iran shot that drone down on purpose, David.
Martha Raddatz leading us off tonight. Martha, thank you.
Up tonight, all eyes are on the Middle East. Early this morning, a U.S. surveillance drone flying above the Straits of Hormuz over international waters shot out of the sky by an Iranian missile. This act of aggression, it's not going to stand. The president is putting the mullahs of Iran on notice tonight. They should be very, very worried. This was a bad idea. Take a look.
Iran made a big mistake. This drone was in international waters. Clearly, we have it all documented. It's documented scientifically, not just words. And they made a very bad mistake.
How will you respond, Mr. President? How will you respond?
You'll find out.
Are you willing to go to war with Iran?
You'll find out. You'll find out. I mean, obviously, you know, we're not going to be talking too much about it. You're going to find out. They made a very big mistake.
Yep, Iran made a very big mistake. They will pay. But tonight, the president is clearly giving the mullahs an opening to pick up the phone and come clean and end their hostile behavior. I like that patience. What about all the liberals that said Donald Trump is rogue and we can't trust him? Okay, he's being very patient. Now, after a meeting at the White House, congressional Republicans, they released this statement, quote, Iran directly attacked a United States asset over international waters. This provocation comes a week after they attacked and destroyed 2 commercial tankers in international waters. There must be a measured response to these actions. How do we define measured? President Trump does not want war. He said so clearly during the campaign. He's not interested in another, years and years long international entanglement. I don't expect one. But in coming days, we will know if the mullahs are smart enough to take the opportunity, which is a small window. It may not even exist within 5 minutes. Because if they don't, the president will have no choice. He will bomb the hell out of them. No need for a long, protracted, boots on the ground kind of war. We have the greatest military, thank God, on the face of this earth. We have the most advanced weapon systems, and a strong message needs to be sent that a huge price will be paid if you take on the United States of America. Simple peace through strength, and it works. In my strong opinion, it is imperative that we as a country develop what I call the next generation of military weaponry. We have learned from Vietnam. We have learned from Iraq and Afghanistan. Sadly, wars we get involved in quickly become politicized. They do not end as they should, with complete victory. We don't want our kids going door to door like they did in Iraq and then having Democrats saying, oh, come home, and then being told, never mind, we didn't mean it. America needs the single most advanced weaponry for all future conflicts. I'd much prefer we devastate our enemies from Tampa, Florida. That generation of weaponry is something we need to advance as a country quickly and expeditiously. Thankfully, tonight, We are in a new era. The weak, feckless Biden-Obama foreign policy is long dead and gone. There will be no late-night shipments of $150 billion in cash and other currency in cargo planes headed for the mullahs in Tehran. There will be no bribes. There will be no European frolics. For John Kerry, there will be no United Nations. This is now a different time. There will be hell to pay, and the world is watching. China tonight is watching. Russia tonight is watching. What happens in Iran will have ramifications all over the world. The North Koreans are watching. This brings us now to a quick Hannity history lesson. It is no mystery why Iran is acting out. Why, in 2015, how this happened, I cannot explain. It is inexplicable. The single dumbest foreign policy deal ever made in the history of this country, Biden-Obama literally loosened economic sanctions on Iran after they had a chance to support young freedom fighters, the younger generation that wanted help, that were quoting, Jefferson and Washington and our framers and founders. And yeah, Biden-Obama gifted the radical Islamic mullahs of Iran $150 billion in cash and other currency. In exchange, well, the Iranian government, they made an unverifiable promise not to build a nuclear weapon for years, but they can do it in 10 years. And, of course, the radical Islamic extremist government of Iran continue to fund terrorism, as they always have all over the world. Proxy wars. They continue to chant death to Israel, death to America. They continue to burn the American flag, the Israeli flag. They are a hostile actor in the region. And thanks to Biden and Obama, well, they had a boatload of cash to spend, funding, fomenting terror around the world. All of this changed January 20th. 2017, President Trump was inaugurated. He pulled the United States out of this horrific Iranian nuclear deal. He reimposed devastating sanctions, and they're working. Tonight, Iran, feeling the effects of the president's policies, they're feeling it in a big way because of the reimposed sanctions. They are now facing years-long recession. 2018, their economy retracted by a whopping 4%. This year, the International Monetary Fund is predicting Iran will lose another 6%. The inflation, also a massive issue in Iran. 2019 alone, inflation likely to top 40%. Meanwhile, our economy is booming. And because of the president's efforts to unleash American energy, we are in the best position we have ever been in as it relates to any conflict in the Middle East. We are now shielded from the crisis because, of course, the lifeblood of every economy is oil and gas, not the new Green Deal. And the Iranian economy has lost value as we have become energy independent. We are now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas. For the first time in 75 years, America is energy independent. We are a net exporter of energy. In other words, we have their leverage. We don't need the Straits of Hormuz as we once did. And Iran is suffering economically. The Iranian people are growing more and more angry and frustrated with their radical government. Iran's armed forces cannot match the might of our military. Now the mullahs must see the writing is on the wall. They either stop funding terror, proxy wars, stop attacking ships in the Gulf of Oman, stop plotting the annihilation of Israel, our closest ally in the Middle East, and the United States. If they do not end this hostility, if they do not stop, the mullahs of Iran will feel pain, I predict, like never before. And they will earn it. They will make.
The US drone was announced on Iranian state television. They did not immediately broadcast any pictures of the attack, but showed instead a file image of the type of drone they said had been hit. An unmanned surveillance aircraft used for gathering imagery of large areas of land in all weathers. Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard commander said it had destroyed the drone because it wanted to send a strong message to the US. Those who defend the borders of the Islamic Nation of Iran will react in a total and decisive way to any intrusions by foreign elements on our land. Our borders are our red line. An enemy that violates our borders will not return and will be destroyed. The commander went on to say that Iran was ready for war, but added that they did not seek conflict with any nation. However, the incident comes at a time of increasing tension between Tehran and Washington. At its heart, the international nuclear deal, which the US withdrew from last year. This week, Iran said it was also no longer willing to abide by the terms of the agreement and could soon restart its nuclear activity. Also raising concerns are attacks on 2 oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman. On Wednesday, the US military presented more evidence it said linked Tehran to the incidents. Iran, for its part, denies involvement. The United States has also said it has no interest in fueling the dispute with Iran. But the fear is a military confrontation could happen not by design, but by accident.
And we're joined now by Simon Mabon, lecturer in international relations at Lancaster University.
Unarmed, the US Air Force shows off its RQ-4A Global Hawk drones. They describe them as tools for surveillance and reconnaissance over ocean and coastal regions. Now one has been shot to pieces, taken out by an Iranian missile. In a televised address, the Revolutionary Guard Commander-in-Chief explained his aerospace division had bravely shot down a spy aircraft which trespassed our borders and was violating our national security boundary, adding, "We've no intention to go to war, but are fully prepared for conflict." Iran says the drone was flying in its airspace and was brought down in the province of Hormuzgan, which runs along the southern coast on the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. US Central Command claims it was shot down above the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian reports that the aircraft was over Iran are false. This was an unprovoked attack on a US surveillance asset in international airspace. Nearly a quarter of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. 2 oil tankers were attacked there a week ago, one Norwegian, the other Japanese.
The limpet mine that was used does bear a striking resemblance to that which has been publicly displayed in the Iranian military parades.
Tehran denied responsibility, then revealed it would soon violate a key element of the 2015 nuclear deal America abandoned. So Donald Trump sent 1,000 extra troops to the region. He's described Iran's overnight drone attack as a big mistake in a tweet that sent oil prices skyward.
Mr. President, will you strike Iran, sir? Will you?
Can you have a measured response?
We'll soon find out. Is that what you said?
It was. But once he'd welcomed Canada's Prime Minister inside, he seemed open to giving Iran the benefit of the doubt.
I have a feeling that it was a mistake made by somebody that shouldn't have been doing what they did. I think they made a mistake. And I'm not just talking about the country made a mistake. I think that somebody under the command of that country made a big mistake.
President Trump claims he isn't being pushed by his hawkish advisers into a war in the Gulf. The UN is urging restraint on both sides, warning the world can't afford one.
Well, earlier I went to the Iranian embassy to speak to the Iranian ambassador to Britain. On my way in, I passed Richard Ratcliffe, now on the 6th day of a protest hunger strike outside in support of his wife Nazanin, who is also on hunger strike in Tehran and has been in prison there since April 2016. So I began by asking the ambassador, Hamid Berdinjad, about how certain he is that the American drone was in Iranian airspace.
Our armed forces are very certain that it's in our airspace, and also the wreckage of the drone now has been found in the Iranian waters. So we are now complaining this to the United Nations, and we would pursue that very seriously because that has been a major provocation by the United States.
Who does Iran think blew up the tankers?
We don't know, but we are certain that there are people and there are countries who have interest to drag the United States into a conflict with Iran. They have invested.
Who are these people?
There are people in White House like John Bolton, which has looking at this very ideologically for so many years.
You mean they might have done it themselves?
I don't want to make any speculation, but I'm saying that there are people and there are countries in the region who are interested to drag the United States into a military confrontation with Iran, and they have invested a lot on this, and they don't want to miss this opportunity because they think that maybe President Trump is not so vigorous.
What about the possibility that rogue elements within Iran did it? There are some elements in Iran of which the government has no control.
These possibilities could exist for other countries also, because always there could be elements out of the control. So
it is possible?
Not for Iran, because we believe that this is a very serious issue, and the people in Iran, I'm sure that they would not venture into such big mistakes, because they know that there are people who are preparing the ground for such confrontation, and I don't think that anybody would be so foolish.
How alarmed is Iran over the build-up of tension? And do you think increasingly war is possible or even probable?
The main problem that we see, which makes us alarming, is the desire of these regional countries like the Saudis, Emiratis, Benjamin Netanyahu, and also some people like John Bolton, who are making efforts to drag the United States into the confrontation. Iran.
Now, Jennifer, you just heard General Deptula say, well, it wasn't like somebody set their coffee cup down and it was that kind of an accident. But this speaks to the issue of what you're saying. Well, who's in charge now?
Well, I think who's in charge, unless we see evidence otherwise, it's still the supreme leader of Iran, Khamenei, who's in charge. And then you have the civilian leadership of President Rouhani. And then you have the IRGC, the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Qasem Soleimani, the top general there. It is hard to imagine that with such a sophisticated SAM missile, surface-to-air missile, that it was a rogue unit of the IRGC. That being said, the president has intelligence, and he is aware of things that we are not aware of right now. And he also has a larger strategic purpose in terms of bringing the Iranians back to the negotiating table. And so the military is providing him with options. They're going to be calibrated options, but they are going to be options designed to send a signal. From my read of hearing that there's a 3 p.m. meeting in the Situation Room with a bipartisan group from Capitol Hill, and the urgency of the meetings and the way in which the Pentagon is rolling out the evidence of where this drone was, it suggests to me that there will be military action. What that military action is at this point, it's hard to say. My guess is they're going to take out that SAM missile because they do know the location of where it was fired from. But that being said, those options were presented to the president. It's also important to point out and remind people, Harris, that international airspace and international waters run 12 nautical miles from the shoreline of Iran. It's when we heard from the top U.S. Air Force general in charge of combined operations over the Gulf just moments ago here at the Pentagon, he made it clear that this Global Hawk drone was flying 20 miles from Iranian, from the spot where the surface-to-air missile was fired. So it is outside of Iranian territory, according to the U.S. military, and that is significant, and that is why the president is going to feel a need to respond.
All right, let's hear from the president of the United States moments ago in the Oval Office on these topics. Watch.
Fortunately, that drone was unarmed. It was not, there was no man in it, and there was no, it was over international waters, clearly over international waters, but we didn't have a man or woman in the drone. We had nobody in the drone.
Are you still open?
It would have made a big difference, let me tell you. Would have made a big, big difference. I have a feeling, I may be wrong, and I may be right, but I'm right a lot. I have a feeling that it was a mistake, but it was a very foolish move. That I can tell you.
And there was the president talking about the specificity of how this could have happened and maybe a mistake. But he said, if this had been a manned drone, a very different situation. General Deptula, Jennifer, was giving us an idea of just how large these craft are, a wingspan larger than a 737. So, you know, some people out who are watching may wonder, well, how could it have been manned at this point? Why would we need to do it? And that the largeness of this, for lack of a better word, really enormity in terms of what most people think of when they think of a drone, speaks to the issue of what we can do in the skies and how far away we can be from different countries.
Well, I think this is the reason that this is unmanned is that diminishes the risk to U.S. military personnel. And what's unfortunate whenever a drone like this is shot down is that it tells the enemies and adversaries what our capabilities are. And the U.S. military has incredible surveillance capabilities. Our allies know that. And now, unfortunately, our enemies also know that. That Global Hawk is worth about $180 million. So it's an expensive loss. There aren't enough drones in the U.S. military. There's a demand for these drones all over the world. So it is a loss, but I think the president is drawing a clear line that there was not a loss of U.S. military personnel lives, and that would change the calculation in terms of a military response or any response at all. And I think he's drawing a very clear line there that any U.S. military personnel who are killed by Iranian actions, there's going to be a very different response. So I think that is a significant messaging that was taking place just moments ago.
So here's the deal. Trump's not the problem, the Ayatollah is. This drone was in international waters. We've been flying patterns like this for months. We're trying to collect intelligence to make informed decisions. We had told the Iranians before they shot the drone down that if you engage against American personnel or assets, you do so at your own peril. The president does not want a war with Iran or anybody else, but he is the commander-in-chief. And so when Abe was asked by the president, the prime minister of Japan, to deliver a message to the Iranians, let's talk, not only was he rebuffed, they attacked a Japanese ship while the Japanese prime minister is delivering a message from the American president, let's see if we can negotiate. So that tells me all I need to know about the Iranian regime and negotiating. So I talked to the president this morning. I'm going to meet him this afternoon.
Senator, he tweets that Iran made a big mistake.
They made a big mistake by shooting our drone down.
Is that provocative in and of itself to tweet that?
No, what's provocative is to shoot the drone down. What's provocative is to blow up a Japanese oil tanker with a Japanese prime minister in your office trying to start negotiations with the United States. What's provocative is having your proxies shoot into Saudi Arabia. Trump's not the problem. So here's the way this is headed. If they start enrichment at the levels they're talking about in a few days, Israel over time will have to respond. There's one nation on the planet that's not going to give the Iranians a pass on their nuclear program. That's Israel. Israel will, as a last resort, attack to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. We will come to their aid. Here's what they're trying to do. They're trying to break our will, intimidate us to come to the negotiating table. The president made an offer to negotiate. The response was to attack a Japanese tanker, the emissary of the person chosen to deliver the offer. And last night they shot down a drone. So here's what Iran needs to get ready for. Severe pain inside their country. That their capabilities pale in comparison to ours. We're not going to let them disrupt navigation of the seas, attack our allies and U.S. interests without paying a price. So if they're itching for a fight, they're going to get one.
Putting militarily
We're a lot closer today than we were yesterday, and only God knows what tomorrow brings. If next week they go back into enrichment, putting them back on a path to a bomb, which they were on anyway, then that escalates the tension between Israel and Iran. If they do anything else against an American asset, and this president doesn't respond like Ronald Reagan, then that's a signal to North Korea and the entire world we're all talk. So Iran's fate is in their hands, and it's up to them to decide how this ends.
What does this look like when you say the U.S. will aid Israel? Help people understand, what does that mean? U.S. military involvement?
100%. If they go back into the enrichment business, that puts them on an accelerated path to a bomb, and Israel has to defend itself against an existential threat, I am confident we will be there. Nobody wants to get there. I'm also confident that we're going to protect the Straits of Hormuz and that we're going to protect American military personnel and civilians on the ground. I'm confident if there's a war with Iran, they lose. I'm confident it would be very devastating to the region, will not be pretty, don't want to go there. But what more do you expect the president to do? If he sends the Japanese prime minister to try to restart negotiations and they blow up a Japanese tanker, I don't know what to
Is the
tell you.
president prepared to act militarily?
I'll let you ask him. I am saying if he does not change the course we're on, then others will act.
But
he's wanted to.
Language. You talked to the president this morning. You'll talk to him later.
Yeah.
Do you believe that he believes what you said, that we're one step closer potentially to war today than
I think
yesterday?
anybody would believe that we're one step closer. They shot down an American asset well within international waters, trying to assess the situation. What are you supposed to do? Just Ronald Reagan took a lot, then he acted. This president's taken a lot from Iran. He was right to get out of a bad deal. He's right to put sanctions on their disruptive behavior throughout the world. He'd like a better deal. To me, it's clear that the Iranians are trying to break us between our allies. They're trying to create chaos to up oil prices. And you can't legitimize this way of negotiating. If we do it with Iran, then the next thing will happen is that North Korea will explode a bomb, shoot off a missile, thinking that's the best way to get America back at the table.
The president said he wanted to stop endless wars in the Middle East on campaign strategy.
All I can tell you,
you convince
if
him
you're
otherwise?
not willing to stand up to aggression, you're going to get hurt. So ignoring Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan was not a very good strategy. This is not an endless war. This is a provocative regime that's dismembered the Mideast, that shoots his own people down in the streets, that threatens the existence of the state of Israel. This is an enemy of mankind, and if you're not willing to take this enemy on, you'll regret it because you're going to put all the pressure on Israel. Here's what I believe about Donald Trump. He's a deal maker. He's trying to avoid conflict, but this is truly a defining moment for him.
Who else participating?
When Obama said to Assad, you better not use chemical weapons, Assad did. The rest is history. Trump has told the Iranians, you cannot disrupt navigation of the seas, you can't attack our interests or our allies. That's an unacceptable way to live in the 21st century. They are testing him. They need to do so at their own peril. If they get away with this, God help us with North Korea and throughout the world. I'm convinced that as a last resort, President Trump will stop this behavior.
Are you
Does he
saying
have
that
a
the
Reagan
president's going to
advisor,
monitor enrichment before deciding to take military action?
I'm saying that if they increase enrichment standards, that Israel will begin to change their calculation. So 95% is what you need to get to a bomb. The difference between 3.5 and 20 is big. From 20 to 95 is like walking across the street.
who else does he have the right advisor, sir, without a SecDef?
Yeah, I don't think it's the lack of a SecDef problem. I think the problem is we're trying to find a way to deal with a rogue regime who's a expeditionary force for evil. We're being tested, and here's what I do believe. They know that they will lose. They just don't believe yet that we have the will to fight back. The day they believe that and they see that, this calms down.
Who else will be in that meeting?
Member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, good morning to you. Can you add to the developing situation anything new that you know, as the president has now responded that Iran has made a very big mistake, he just tweeted?
Yeah, Iran is acting out. Clearly, the pressure that the United States has been applying to Iran, they're feeling it with regards to their economy. We also have to understand that domestic politics for Iran, they seek to appease hardliners. We criticize the regime. It's not just the senior leadership, but they also have people on their right that they seem to be more concerned about than all of the many millions of Iranian people who actually want a free, stable, democratic, peaceful Iran. That's what they talk about instead. So what we're hearing is that from the intel that we're receiving here on Capitol Hill is that this actually didn't go down within Iran's borders. It was over international waters. Iran's going to continue to set themselves backwards if they don't engage in productive diplomacy. The United States does not want military conflict with Iran. The President of the United States does not want military conflict with Iran. We would love to see a resolution with regards to these nuclear and non-nuclear activities that Iran's engaged in.
It is a tough neighborhood, as you well know. We talked about this a lot. I just want to show our viewers on the map here the area that we are discussing, okay, sir? And then very specific question as to what's happening with our allies and what sort of support or lack of it we may be getting. On the map over here, here is the neighborhood I mentioned, Saudi Arabia, the west, Iraq to the north, Iran here. This is the Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, that choke point where 20% of the world's oil squeezes through on a daily and weekly basis. This is the port city of Chabahar. According to the Iranians, this is where a truck-based missile was fired at 4 o'clock in the morning. And again, as you mentioned, they're claiming credit for it. But this choke point, the amount of oil that goes through here, you know, those 2 tankers were hit by those landmines in the last 2 weeks in this exact area. Among our allies, who will come and defend us, knowing the Europeans right now are fighting us on this nuclear deal?
First and foremost, it's nations all throughout the Middle East greatly concerned with Iranian aggression. You have a number of countries that used to view Israel, for example, as an adversary. They're so concerned with the Iranian aggression that they're actually starting to view Israel in a different light. So the alliances are shifting within the Middle East. Iran's non-nuclear activities that we saw before the negotiation of the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, during the negotiation, and especially afterwards when Iran got all of this cash, their vision is to build a land bridge across the Middle East. They worked with the Houthis to overthrow the government in Yemen. They work with Assad in Syria. They have great influence over the Iraqi government in Baghdad. So as far as our best allies in this effort, while there was a P5+1 that included 3 European countries, the UK, France, Germany, it included China, it included Russia. If you want to find our best friends when trying to respond to what Iranian aggression is happening each day, you're going to find it in the countries all around Iran greatly concerned with this aggression.
Congressman, I want to update our viewers on what you see at the bottom of your screen there, that we just got word that there's going to be an 11 a.m. Eastern Time White House meeting on Iran. As far as who will be in that meeting, we know that both Pat Shanahan and Mark Esper are going to be attending from the Pentagon. Those, of course, are the outgoing and incoming acting defense secretaries. As far as our response here, what we have heard from the Pentagon, what we have heard from the President Trump has not ruled out using military force, although we constantly hear, as we did from Peter Navarro, avoiding all-out war. How specifically do you want to see us respond to the latest developments?
Well, first, we need to continue to make it absolutely clear to Iran that we will have zero tolerance for the targeting of the United States personnel, of United States national security interests. When you attack the United States, it's very different than a situation where they might be aggressive in a neighboring country. We're concerned about that, but as far as red lines on our end, there should be a military response if we are attacked by Iran. That message needs to be out there. Now, as far as the military option, again, I want to reiterate, I don't want to see a military option. I want to see it's the last possible option. The president doesn't want military conflict. I don't believe that our country wants military conflict. But I do believe that for everyone out there who believes in the multiple instruments of national power, diplomacy, information, economics, applying economic pressure, having bilateral diplomacy, multilateral diplomacy with other nations that are concerned, or the information campaign where, as I mentioned earlier, millions of Iranians are concerned about the people leading their own country. To make those other instruments of national power more effective, it's helpful to have the military option on the table as a deterrent.
You're not going to get much of an argument from this administration on that. Final question with regard to the administration. What do you know about the message Mike Pompeo delivered in Iraq in the month of May that was destined for Tehran about not killing a single American?
So Secretary Pompeo is very intelligent and will stand his ground in being concerned about Iranian aggression, specifically in Iraq, as well as what we're seeing in other countries. But what we need is for the Iraqi government, there are many who aren't beholden to Iran within the Iraqi government, for them to know that the United States has their back, their support, their encouragement to have their own sovereignty, to control their own destiny, and not allow themselves to become proxies for Iran. So I believe that in any of these conversations, he'd be well prepped, he'd stand his ground, offer encouragement and support for the Iraqis to not allow Iran.
We shall find out together in time whether or not Iran received that message. Thank you, sir, for your time today. The Republican Lee Zeldin out of New York.
Thank you, Congress. Fox News national security and foreign affairs analyst. There are so many theories about this right now. I'm interested in your take. What is it?
Well, first of all, the big picture, Melissa, is that we are tightening the screws around Iranian interest and deployment in the region. This explains why Tehran is trying to do those small strikes for now. And in this case, I would argue that they knew what they were doing. They were targeting a drone, unmanned drone, because they know that if the American public would see American victims, then that would give the president a lot of fuel to be responding. So at the end of the day, the White House will decide at what time, where, and how to respond to this Iranian attack.
So, I mean, they want to provoke, but not too much. What's the value in that?
They need to continue to provoke so that their public, and remember, they control 4 regimes in the region, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. All these countries will uprise if they see that Iran has been weakened. So they're going to continue to show strength, but not beyond the red line, which is to harming Americans. They could shoot anytime or bomb anytime our forces in Iraq. They're very careful about that, but they're going to continue with those small kind of actions.
What do you think the appropriate response is?
Well, there are a lot of scenarios. It depends on the big picture, on what the administration wants to do. If it feels it has all the strength, the political strength, unity, and resources to do a large scale against Iranian military, not necessarily on the ground or from the ground, then they can. But if they feel that politically they don't have that strength, they don't have that backing at this point in time, we will have to respond, but not to trigger a much wider conflict that we're not ready for now.
Yeah. If they respond with force, what happens from there? What does the U.S. gain out of that? And what's the impact on, everyone's relationship in the region?
Look, the Iranians have to do this because of their equation. They have to show strength. We have to respond somehow because we have allies on the ground as well, and because the Iranians will go 1 inch further. And of course, because the rules of engagement, if we are attacked, now this is a drone, next time it could be a manned vehicle or a tank or any other thing. So we are in a very delicate situation where we have to respond, but it doesn't have to be the way the Iranians would expect it, meaning going back to the base where those missiles were launched. Doesn't have to be that way. That's what the administration is discussing as we speak right now.
Yeah, I mean, they must expect a response of some type. So, I don't know. I mean, do you go bigger or smaller than that? Do you go bigger to kind of push them back on their heels, or it's hard to understand the chess game here if everybody kind of knows what should come next.
You called it exactly what it is. It's a huge chess game. They know that they're going to be a strike. They want to try to use it to counter-strike and to show that they are strong on the ground. But they have another message. They know that we have political divisions in Washington, and they feel that between now, if they can withstand between now and, let's say, the end of the year, next year is a campaign elections year, so they are trying to show strength to a certain point, not to be hit back by us with a full-fledged capacity of the American military.
What's the price of not responding?
That would be bad. If we don't respond in a way or another, maybe through allies or others, then this is going to encourage the Iranians. We are locked, both of us, in a game whereby they will strike, we have to counter-strike, but not to go full-fledged because we don't have that readiness, I suppose, on the political level.
Oh, my checks are in. Airspace, but Iran's Revolutionary Guard claims the drone had entered Iranian territory and says it is, quote, ready for war if necessary.
Tensions between the two countries have been rising since recent attacks on oil tankers in the region. Number 2, a Syrian refugee is under arrest in Pittsburgh, charged with plotting to attack a local church.
Prosecutors say the ISIS-inspired plot included an explosive device strong enough to destroy the church and likely kill many people in the surrounding area. FBI agents searched the suspect's apartment yesterday.
21-year-old Mustafa Massoud Alomer came to the U.S. from Syria in 2016. The suspect allegedly spoke to an undercover FBI employee about the plot.
On to number 3, a police officer killed in the line of duty in Sacramento, California.
She was shot while responding to a domestic call. Officer Tara O'Sullivan joined the force just last year. The suspect then got into a shootout with police.
We head to the campaign trail for number 4. Joe Biden is not apologizing.
He declared there's not a racist bone in his body while responding to the backlash over his remarks about working with segregationist senators and getting things done with civility.
Biden fired back after fellow Democrat Senator Cory Booker called on him to apologize, saying Booker should apologize.
And finally, number 5, 8 years after the end of her daytime talk show, she's not ruling out a reboot.
That she? Oprah, who tells Entertainment Tonight that she would love to make that happen, but maybe not every day. She said the only time she's missed having a show has been during the election or when something big happens in the news.
And this would be really big if Oprah came back. Drone escalating the already heightened tensions between the two countries.
It happened early this morning, just days after the U.S. announced plans to send 1,000 more troops to the region. ABC's Stephanie Ramos is monitoring the situation from the London Bureau. Stephanie, good morning.
Kenneth and Janae, good morning. That's right. We are learning that Iran shot down an unarmed U.S. Navy drone as it was flying over the Strait of Hormuz in international airspace. This is a direct attack on a U.S. military asset, and Iran is not denying that they are responsible. Iran's Revolutionary Guard commander says while Iran has no intention of war with anyone, it is ready for war, and that the shooting down of that U.S. drone sends a clear message to America. Now, the commander has also said this morning that, quote, our borders are our red line. Any enemy that violates them will not return and will be destroyed. So Iran is saying this happened over their territory, but we, of course, will be watching to see where the Pentagon says this actually happened.
Stephanie, this is not the first time Iran has targeted a drone. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. It was just about a week ago when Iran tried to shoot down a reconnaissance drone that was surveilling the attack on one of the 2 tankers in the Gulf of Oman. The United States has blamed Iran for being responsible for the attacks on those 2 tankers, but Iran has denied that claim. So with this latest incident, the question remains, how will the Trump administration respond to this? Kenneth, Janae?
Our thanks to Stephanie Ramos for joining us this morning from the London Bureau. Now to the other big story this morning. Former
report. Now reporting, David Muir.
And good afternoon. We come on the air at this hour because we are following rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran. In fact, just a short time ago at the Pentagon, this was audio only, but we did hear from the commander of the U.S. Air Force's Central Command in the region, Lieutenant General Joseph Guastella, who told reporters in the statement to the Pentagon briefing room that a Global Hawk drone was flying over the Gulf of Oman near the Strait of Hormuz. This was a U.S. Navy drone on a recent surveillance mission in international airspace in the vicinity of recent maritime attacks when it was shot down by a surface-to-air missile fired from a location, and this is significant, he said, in the vicinity of Gork, Iran, from Iran. That is something Iran disputes. They do not dispute the drone coming down, but they do say that drone was over Iran and not over international airspace. I want to get right to Mary Bruce. Quickly, Mary, you asked the president moments ago, would we be taking action against Iran? And he was very quick with his answer.
Well, the president said that we would be hearing something more soon. We know that he has just been meeting with Justin Trudeau of Canada in the Oval Office, and he was asked even more about his response to Iran's actions and what he plans to do about it. David, I believe we are about to hear some of that directly from the president.
This is the president in the Oval Office moments ago.
Drone was in international waters. Clearly, we have it all documented. It's documented scientifically, not just words. And they made a very bad mistake.
How will you respond, Mr. President? How will you respond?
You'll find out.
Are you willing to go to war with Iran?
You'll find out. You'll find out. I mean, obviously, you know, we're not going to be talking too much about it. You're going to find out. They made a very big mistake.
Mr. President, what are your concerns about China and the Canadians who are detained, sir?
No concerns. We'll be discussing that. It'll be one of the issues I think we'll be discussing right now with Justin.
Mr. President, the Fed made no change to the interest rate.
Say it?
The Fed made no change to the interest rate.
Well, I guess they indicated they're going to be lower. He should have done sooner, but what are you going to do? Can't win them all. He should have done it sooner, but you can't win it all. And eventually he'll do what's right, perhaps. Let's see what he does.
Will you ask China to release the Canadians? Will you ask China to release the Canadians? You intend to
Obviously, we're very concerned about the escalation by Iran recently. We have significant presence in the area, including leading on the NATO mission in Baghdad in Iraq. We look forward to discussing with our closest ally their perspectives on this and how we can move forward as an international community.
Will you ask China to release the Canadian
meeting with Xi Jinping? Will you help Justin Trudeau get a meeting with Xi Jinping at the G20 next week to talk about the detainees?
Well, I don't know that he's trying to meet. Are you trying to get a meeting?
We've got a lot of things to discuss.
Well, otherwise, I'll represent him well. I will tell you. We have a meeting set up with President Xi, and it's
President Trump in the Oval Office just moments ago. You heard the president say he thinks Iran shooting down that U.S. drone may have been a mistake in his words. He said it may have been someone under command of Iranian government who made a mistake. I find it hard to believe that it was intentional, adding it could have been somebody who was loose and stupid. Let's get to our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, because it would seem from those words right there, Martha, that the president is offering some sort of a window here to perhaps to bring down this escalation.
He may be trying to do that, but Iran is ramping it right back up, as you mentioned. And the foreign minister, Zarif, tweeted just a short time ago, the U.S. wages economic terrorism on Iran and has conducted covert action and now encroaches on our territory, saying we'll take this new aggression to the UN and show that the U.S. is lying about international waters. They said from the moment their surface-to-air missile hit our very sophisticated drone that it was in Iranian territorial waters. But you heard the president, you heard the commander in Qatar saying quite firmly that is not true and that they've made a big mistake. The commander in Qatar saying this is dangerous and escalatory action. So we're getting a lot of different messages today. But as you know, David, the president has been very firm about Iran. Over the years, he has been in office saying it's a country of terror and he will not take it.
I want to underscore that key point you made there, Martha, that Iran says this was not over international waters. It was over their airspace. The U.S. very clear this morning in that statement from the Pentagon, from the region, saying that was not the case and that this drone fell down into international waters and that it could have put lives in danger. I want to bring in our senior White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, because we know as soon as the White House heard about this, last night about 7:30 Eastern time, they did convene members of the security team with the president.
Yeah, they were reportedly, David, so concerned about what had happened that they convened this meeting in the evening, and Sarah Sanders confirmed that that meeting had happened. We now know that the president has been briefed at least twice, this morning and last night. There have been a number of briefings, frankly, that have been happening. The National Security Council, very high senior level officials in that group met at the White House this morning. That included the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford. Congressional leaders from both parties have been briefed on this. But, you know, David, you were just saying this is a real test for President Trump right now, that he will have to make a decision as to what to do. It seems from his comments that he just gave in the White House that he is leaving a little bit of an opening with Iran. We also know that he has a number of hawks in his administration, senior level hawks who have advocated for attacks on Iran in recent history. The president himself has vacillated a little bit. He has said he does not want to see war with Iran or war again in the Middle East. But I think at this point we have to wait to see what he's going to do on this. You hear his military leaders saying dangerous and escalatory attacks.
And you speak of the hawks in the administration. He also has allies over on the Hill. Senator Lindsey Graham, for one, Cecilia, said we're a lot closer today than we were yesterday, and only God knows what tomorrow brings. Senator Graham saying that the U.S. would protect Israel, and if the U.S. goes to war with Iran, that he is confident that Iran would win. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, has also talked this morning, saying there is no appetite for going to war. I think it's a dangerous situation. Let's make sure that we don't have the beating of the drum for something without the clarity of the facts involved. So let's bring in Mary Bruce, our congressional correspondent, who is at the White House this morning. And Mary, two very different statements from Lindsey Graham and Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, David, and the president has been getting even some mixed messages from within his own party on what should come next here. While our team has been speaking with many top Republicans on the Hill who are urging caution against the use of force, you mentioned those more hawkish Republicans like Senator Lindsey Graham coming out and saying that it would be appropriate for the U.S. to use military force. And he's been encouraging forceful action. The reason that is so significant, David, is that Lindsey Graham is one of those key players on the Hill who really has the president's ear. And we heard from him just a short while ago saying that this entire situation presents a test to the president, that he will be judged by what he does next. There is no doubt that the president, I'm sure, is listening closely to those messages that he's getting from his allies on the Hill.
Yeah, varied messages from over on the Hill. Mary talking about Senator Lindsey Graham moments ago. In fact, he talked about the past President Obama, the previous administration, and their discussions of a red line in Syria, and said, let's not make the same mistake this time, in so many words, putting some pressure on the president to take a very close look at what he's witnessing from Iran. Let's listen to Senator Graham just moments ago. Here's what he said.
Trump has told the Iranians, you cannot disrupt navigation of the seas, you can't attack our interests or our allies. That's an unacceptable way to live in the 21st century. They are testing him. They need to do so at their own peril. If they get away with this, God help us with North Korea and throughout the world. I'm convinced that as a last resort, President Trump will stop this behavior.
Are you saying that That's Senator Lindsey Graham just moments ago. I want to bring in our global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, again. And Martha, all of this playing out amid these rising tensions and a need for leadership at the top of the Pentagon. Several roles remain unfilled, unconfirmed by the Senate. And we had the acting Pentagon chief reveal that he was out just a couple of days ago. And Martha, let's look at this video just in. This is from the Pentagon. They said this would offer an illustration of perhaps of what they saw in the last 24 hours. And again, as you're watching us here this afternoon, we are following breaking coverage of the White House and its decision-making process after we learned a surveillance mission, a drone, was shot down by a surface-to-air missile from Iran, taking down a U.S. Navy drone. The Pentagon today saying this was an unprovoked attack, that this surface-to-air missile was inside Iran. This was an effort, they say, to disrupt surveillance of aircraft in the Strait of Hormuz. And as you know, we've been reporting here at length about those oil ships that had been attacked. The U.S. saying they have evidence, in fact, that it was the Iranians. They showed that video previously of what appeared to be Iranian ships taking away some of the debris from the mine, the explosions in the waters there. The Pentagon making it clear this morning that they say this drone was a significant distance from the Iranian coastline, and they called the attack irresponsible and that it could have put lives in danger. But back to that point, Martha, that I made a moment ago, leadership issues at the top of the Pentagon, and these come at a very, very serious time for the administration.
They certainly do. And you have acting Defense Secretary Pat Shanahan and soon to be Acting Defense Secretary Mark Esper. That will begin this weekend on Sunday on this handoff right in the middle of what's going on right now. And we should remember that 4 tankers were attacked about a month ago in the Gulf, and that we have sent 25 or are sending 2,500 additional forces to the area, additional Patriot missile batteries, additional fighter aircraft. This was all before this happened. This was something that Central Command wanted for force protection. I'm sure that drone was part of that surveillance and that sort of force protection. And also a reminder of how sophisticated that drone is, David. That drone cost more than $120 million. Was flying, they said, at about 34,000 kilometers. They say, and we'll have to keep on this, that it was in international waters, and they are certain about that no matter what the Iranians say.
And of course, that's the distinction being disputed by the Iranians, leading to this moment that we're now watching play out with you all at home today. And this, as Martha points out, was an unmanned aircraft. It cost more than $100 million. It was a Boeing, let me give you an idea, the wingspan, larger than a Boeing 737, just the size and scope of these drones. So often we think of the drones as much smaller. This was a major piece of equipment in the air at a cost of more than $100 million. And it was in the air precisely because of what you heard Martha say there, because of those attacks on oil ships in the region. I want to bring back in Cecilia Vega, because another key point here has been the effort to present evidence not only to the American people, but to the global audience listening and watching this very closely, world leaders. Many had signaled that there wasn't enough evidence, that they weren't comfortable yet that the Iranians were definitely behind what we saw with those oil ships in recent days. We heard something a little different from Angela Merkel in the last 24 hours, the German chancellor, but big questions about whether or not they have a coalition should they take this step forward.
And I think this is something that we've been talking about for a long time now. What will happen when the United States has a very serious international decision to make, like whether to strike on another country when credibility is on the line? And I think a lot of the president's critics would say that is certainly the case in these questions about Iran. I'm just going back to thinking back to what the president just said in the Oval Office, that he finds it hard to believe that if it was intentional, he said this, he believes that this could have been somebody loose and stupid. David, that's not what Iran is saying. Iran themselves are saying shooting down the American spy drone had a clear, decisive, firm, and accurate message. So I think some of those questions that we have been hearing leading up to today, we will continue to hear into tomorrow.
Clear dispute. Senator Lindsey Graham, I mentioned a moment ago that he spoke to reporters. You saw a little portion of that, but he went on to say that the president does not want war with Iran. As you know, we reported here the Japanese prime minister had been sent to Iran, was asked by the president, for Prime Minister Abe, to deliver a message to the Iranians to talk, to re-engage in some sort of negotiation, in some sort of diplomatic effort. And I have a little more from the president in the Oval Office moments ago, a hint perhaps that they are giving the Iranians some room here before any steps are taken. Let's listen.
I don't know. I find it hard to believe it was intentional, if you want to know the truth. I think that it could have been somebody who was loose and stupid that did it. We'll be able to report back, and you'll understand exactly what happened. But it was a very foolish move. That I can tell you.
The president suggesting it might have been someone loose and stupid, as I had mentioned earlier. As we all know, the president did tweet this morning, the Iranians reacting to the president's tweet, but that tweet came at 10:15 this morning. Iran made a very big mistake. And Senator Graham was asked about what the president had tweeted, asking, is that provoking the Iranians? And he said, no, what's provocative is to shoot down a drone. And again, as we continue to hammer home this morning, the difference here is the Iranians said that drone that was shot down was over Iranian airspace and not international waters. As we heard from the U.S. Navy and the Pentagon this morning, they say that clearly was not true, and that when the drone in fact came down and hit the water, it was in international waters, and they point out it could have put people in danger. We'll continue to follow this situation very closely throughout the day. Late news on April.